welcome back to the Integrate Intelligently podcast. Today's episode is Season 2, Episode 12. Does CADTALK take the place of a CAD, PDM, and PLM system? So Scott, welcome back after a Memorial Day holiday, long weekend. Big doings in Cincinnati. We have this annual event called the Taste of Cincinnati, where all these vendors come down, these food vendors come down to the Memorial Day weekend, and you can go around. It's really a cool event. You can go around and taste little parts and see who like the best food in Cincinnati. Did you go to that? I missed it this year, but I usually love going to that.
Yeah, we went this year. My wife is a foodie, as you know, she loves all the new stuff, and so we went down there and checked it out. Like I had to plan in a little bit of a cheat day with that. I had to plan my food around that, because I'm on this weight loss thing, and it's hard to eat right when you're able to sample all these different things. But it was still was able to hit my a little over my calories, but I was able to make the burn kind of equal out. But it was like they had all kinds of cool stuff like banana pudding and ice cream, and like they had this thing called they had like an egg roll that was there was a chicken egg roll that you could try with curry sauce. It was so good. I mean, it was very tasty. So yeah, we had a great time. So
yeah, I'm sorry I missed it. We have gone in the past. My wife and boys, eating the food is fun, but the crowds, they complain about the crowds because of course it's packed, right? All kinds of people down there. Now, what was nice is usually it's really hot, but this weekend it wasn't hot down. So I'm sure it was really nice to go down there. You go, of course, you could spend a fortune.
Oh yeah. I think it was expensive to do it. The crowds weren't too bad, and I think they did a better job with the layout, but the weather was perfect. I did get a sunburn, which I wasn't expecting because it was so cool. And then, of course, I get a sunburn just like if I walk outside for a few minutes, I get sunburned. But it was, it was good. I mean, but it just started getting crowded towards the end, and then it's a packed house, but it's a lot of fun. It's like they block off the streets downtown, and you can walk. It's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, it's a fun event. It's a really cool event. I don't know if other cities do this, but it's something they do in Cincinnati every Memorial Day weekend. They've been doing it for, I don't know, 30, 40 years maybe. And you can go down and get, probably everything's $8 or $12, right? Every dish is like $8 or $12, but you can sample all kinds of different restaurants all at one time. It's a really nice event.
Yeah, we really like doing the food trucks because those are harder to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And the restaurants, because restaurants stay in one place, but the food trucks, you have to be lucky enough for them to be where you're at. Right. So you can go sample all these. So it's like the first time where all the food trucks are in one place, and you just go to all the food trucks. It's kind of cool.
Right. It's like what do they call that? Like food truck row or something.
Yeah. It's really. Yeah. There's some of the best foods actually on those food trucks. So.
I don't doubt it. That's well. Today we're talking about CAD. It's more tactical today. Less about the theory of manufacturing or about manufacturing as a whole. More tactical about like CADTALK, but also about CAD, PDM, PLM, and integration. And the source of this topic today is around, does CADTALK replace a PDM or PLM system? So this is a question that came up recently on a webinar. And I've gotten this question a few times with customers, especially in certain areas of different ERPs where the ERP has different functionality. So I think we're going to dig in really and talk about is CADTALK a replacement for those systems, those PDM, PLM systems, how that works, and kind of how the whole ecosystem works. Because if you're working in manufacturing and you're an engineer, you have you have all these sister systems, and it can get confusing. I always joked about like the vocabulary, right? We talked about this in the past, like you have PDM and PLM and ERP and CAM and CAM and you have all these different systems. So today is really about getting to the core question of, why does this come up so frequently? Why do people ask about this? And what do each system do, and how do they interplay with one another? So Scott, you'll be the expert here since you've worked with CAD. You worked with, as an engineer, you worked with CAD and PDM, and you of course worked with ERP, implementing ERP systems. So be a good topic for a lot of people to understand, why do they think that CADTALK is a replacement for an engineering system like a PDM or PLM?
Sure. I mean, it's I start first of all, the topic, I'm kind of wouldn't be much of a, I think it's because we're so familiar with it. It almost seems like so my first reaction is that's a silly question, but then I get it now, why people ask that. It's and it's always silly because I know, right? It's that's the kind of things comes up a lot. So I don't think we get mistaken for a CAD very often. Probably,
No, not for a CAD.
PDM or PLM would be a more
Mm-hmm.
accurate one. And I think that like because sometimes like the PDM or PLM was created. Sometimes one of the things that they try to create was by having those systems was to solve the problem. Sometimes one of the use cases was to try to solve the problem of an integration to another system, particularly an ERP. And the problem is it doesn't really solve that, not completely, right? So the PLM and the PDM, PDM being document management, product document management, like how to handle the CAD files and organize them. Because in the past, we had a past episode about this. It's like they used to be on file drives and sharing the files was a problem and stuff like that. So PDM was working to solve that. PLM was talking about more around like ECNs and those types of processes, to manage the life cycle of the product. And that's where I think the line gets really fuzzy around like what's PLM, what's his ERP, and the idea was there's also some MBOM being manufactured bill of materials being stored there, so it gets really fuzzy. So a lot of solutions, the market's been educated to think that like PLM is the solution to the integration, and it's actually not. It's not the solution. It could be part of it. It could not be part of it. It's just one of the things but it's been kind of marketed as being this combination. So when people see CADTALK, they're like, oh, you're doing like there's these things that happen around, there's these jobs to be done around this work. How much of those jobs are you doing? Right. And then like, are you doing the vaulting of the parts? Are you handling the life cycle of the thing? So a lot of solutions in the past were trying to do with traditional PDM or PLM functions along with the integration. Okay. And then our strategy was like, it'd be very difficult for us to do PLM or PDM functions better than the CAD systems or the providers, the software providers are creating them. So like it's really hard to out SolidWorks. Like it's difficult. So like they created because back in the early 90s and early in the 2000s when I was coming up, there were separate companies that were doing PDM, and then they were working with all the different CAD vendors. And then the CAD vendors started creating their own PDMs. And they're still standalone PDMs, obviously, but those were people just started buying the one that came with it because they were able to take advantage of bundling. They were able to bundle Vault with Inventor, or they were able to bundle SolidWorks PDM with SolidWorks. So the people just kind of bought what came with it, and it worked better because it worked with the thing that they built. It's all one product. And then PLM came out, and there's lots of different PLM vendors, but those start consolidating to the CAD vendors because they're really good at working with their own stuff. Is the problem comes into, so the job that needs to be done is what happens if they have to start talking to things that aren't their stuff, and that's where we sit really well. Is that we sit as kind of as an independent in the middle who knows how to talk to all these different systems, and we become that translator. We become that person who helps with the translation between the systems. And the problem with that is that will probably always exist as long as there's multiple vendors selling stuff.
Right.
And so we're not trying to be another system like a PDM or PLM. We're just trying to be a way to get these to be and the thing that we talk about recently is we're trying to be the intelligence of these systems. We're trying to be the one that ties them all together and ends up being the intelligence. And there's this concept of a digital thread. So we'll keep with that analogy. That thread kind of throws through these different systems, and we're like that intelligent needle that threads them all together.
That's a good point. Like I was thinking about, I talk to a lot of customers that I've been to lots of conferences. And of course I talk to customers on the phone and part of the sales process. And because there are so many people involved in the whole cycle, right? Because it's not just engineering. So even if you have a CAD system and a PDM, like you said, those are jobs to be done. And then if you have a PLM, there are jobs to be done there that are non-engineering jobs because it can involve quality, it can involve purchasing, lots of other things. And then you have ERP, which includes, manufacturing, includes POs and all the financials. So you have lots of people involved in the conversations when we're talking to customers, right? And then, so from the outside, an engineer would understand, of course, PDM very well and CAD. They understand that, like, oh, I need a CAD system to do my designs. I need a PDM to lock down my designs, check them in, check them out. Some workflow, some automation for drawings, some PDFs, maybe some other revisioning, sharing those files within the system. And then, but you have people who aren't in that world, who don't know engineering systems, who are involved in the conversation, they just don't know, right? They're like, well, does CADTalk replace that? So if you're an IT director or a CIO, you come in and say, well, can I consolidate, right? Can I consolidate these systems? Can I just get rid of like PDM or PLM and just use CADTalk with ERP? Or can I just use CAD and no PDM system? So I think we talked about this in the past, is that they all have different jobs to be done, to your point. Now, there are some overlaps. And I think it's what makes it confusing with CADTalk, what CADTalk specializes in. We specialize really in, like you said, the integration, that digital needle, that intelligent needle to weave the thread together. To have a digital thread, you have to have, that thread has to go from CAD into some sort of engineering system, PLM or PDM, and into some ERP system and back, right? So for changes, this kind of cycle of updates. But you got to connect them somehow. And to your point, there are different vendors, all the different combinations of vendors, right? You have SolidWorks and you have Dassault products and Autodesk products and Siemens products and PTC products. And then you have all these various ERPs, and you can mix and match all of those. And to your point, it gets confusing for people because like you said, that sometimes they'll say, we need a PLM. And they think, oh, I need a PLM because I want to have a quality module, or maybe I want to have manufacturing steps in there, process documentation or other documentation, maybe quality documentation. They go, I want to buy a PLM. And then they think, well, it'll be connected to my ERP. And they don't realize that like PLMs are not necessarily connected to ERPs at all. They right. A lot of times they aren't. Even with the biggest vendors, I know that like, let's say the biggest vendor out there is SAP and Oracle, with the really huge enterprise systems, multi-billion-dollar companies run on those systems where they do engineering, so like Boeing or Airbus or these ones, especially aerospace or defense. They'll have a PLM system, and they'll have SAP. Even when they have like, say, PLM, like a Team Center or something like that, and connect to SAP, it's not connected directly out of the box. They got like a framework that you can use to connect the systems together. And Team Center builds one for, SAP and for Oracle, but they don't build one for, I should say, they provide a framework for connecting to those, and they don't build ones for Infor. They don't build ones for Acumatica, or they don't build ones for all those other ERPs out there that customers might have.
Yeah, they don't. And it'd be difficult for them to do so, right? There's just too many. I mean, that's the problem. And like, so to say if it would replace it, like in a case of PLM, if you bought the PLM because you wanted to make it easier to integrate to your ERP, and that's the only reason you got it, then there is a case there where we can replace it, because like we can work with a PDM, we can work directly with CAD, we can do all of that. It just depends on what you're using the tool for, right? So I think because even at the end of the day, if you bought the PLM, you're still got to integrate it to the ERP. Like that that actually has to happen. Because they don't integrate to the ERP typically natively. Somebody's building that integration. Somebody's doing that. They either have a thing, and it's usually for a select few of ERPs that they see a lot of volume. But if they don't, then they go to a person like us and the reason we're able to do it is because we integrate to all the PLMs and all the PDMs and all the CADs with all the ERPs. There actually is enough volume to create a business to keep those things alive. But if you're like Team Center or you're, Windchill, and you've got to worry about like 75 different ERPs, you're just not going to do that because you don't know the combinations are ever going to come up. So, hence why there's something that we created called CADTalk. I mean, that's why it does it. So that's where the market really comes from. And I understand from like an IT perspective, if you're a company, your IT is like, can I just get, can I
get rid of this thing?
Can I get rid of this thing and just buy one thing, and I can save money, or I can do this and get the problem. Totally valid. You should do that as an IT director, at a company. But like, unfortunately, it's not that simple. It's like, you have to, like, you never get away from paying that for that thing. Right. And it's just and then the downside of that, like, so a lot of people will do it. I think one of the biggest competitors we have is, the biggest competitor is doing nothing. The next biggest competitor would be a custom integration. Like somebody would go and write it for your application. And then the value prop that we would have over top of that would be that, like the hard thing about integration is that not only is a problem we have too, but we're able to solve it, is that not only does the integration software have to change, has maintenance to it. All the other systems integrating to also have maintenance going on that's outside of their control. So to give you an example, like CADTALK, we could have bugs that get created by us in the CADTALK product. We also have to deal with the bugs created by all the systems we integrate to. And those systems are being upgraded all the time. Like there's new version of Sightline coming on, new version of IFS, new version of SolidWorks. We have to make sure all of our stuff works with those different versions all the time at any given time, and for several versions back, because not everybody upgrades at the same time. So the beauty of like when you get an off the shelf, having an off the shelf integration like we provide, is that we take care of all of that complexity of the fact that there's multiple systems changing at the same time and they're evolving all the time. Whereas if you were to build that with a custom integration, you would have to have that essentially reevaluated, at a certain cadence to make sure it keeps working. And we've done that a lot. Customers will write their own and then they realize they can't maintain it because the guy wins the lottery, he no longer works there, or he got another job, and then they just don't know how it works, and then they have no way to do it, and they're locked into certain versions of the product, the other system they integrate to. There's a lot of headaches there. And that's how we provide it. So we're not trying to be those systems. We're trying to be that digital thread between them.
Try to make it easier, because you're absolutely the reason why anybody can, a lot of open APIs, you can write your own integration. People do it all the time. You don't absolutely need us. Go ahead and write that. You can support it. The biggest challenge we find is that, to your point, is like what you don't realize is these systems upgrade and they change. Mm-hmm. They're making improvements and they change, and then they have bugs, and then the business changes as well, right? Like the business requirements can change. Especially we talked about last week, I think, or even on my recent webinar about tariffs. Those things can change like business needs and change business logic. And when you write your own, guess what? You got to get in there and or you get a custom integration. Even if you don't write your own, you pay you buy a vendor and they got to customize it. If your business changes or any of that stuff happens, you really have challenges there around how to adapt. And so, but to your point, Scott, it doesn't replace those, because the job to be done in PDM is very specific. The job to be done in PLM, the jobs to be done are specific, which don't usually include integration.
Yeah. Or it might simplify the integration. They try to make it easier to do integration, but it doesn't solve it. It doesn't completely do it until, and we were talking about this, last week in a presentation too, is like the job, the whole purpose of like the ERP is to make things, is to get things made, right? Is to keep track of it and get the counting done, all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of tools, a lot of our competitors are worried about like, let's just get the bill. It's a BOM import tool, right? We're not we don't consider ourselves a BOM import tool. We consider ourselves a tool to go from engineering intent to manufacturing execution, right? How do we get the engineer's design made? How do we get it made, right? That's the job that actually has to get done. Putting it in the ERP is table stakes. That's the first. We have to get it in the ERP, and we have to get it in the ERP in a format where you actually can make the thing. Because that's what manufacturing companies care about. They care about making the thing so they could sell it and collect money. That's what manufacturers do. So getting a bill of material and importing it into the ERP is like step 0.5. It doesn't actually, it's figuring out how to make the thing, and getting it in the ERP into a position where you can make it and make money on it is the actual complete job to be done. And that part that's the hard part. That's the part that we want to solve. It's like, how do we do that? How do we tie these things together where that process can be automated as much as possible? That requires a certain level of complexity to solve. It's kind of like we were actually having this debate internally about like whether or not, there's lots of tools that do what they call ETL, right? Mm-hmm. Extract, transform, load. And is CADTALK just a standard ETL? I would argue that it is not. It is a specialized, a very niche ETL. Right. And then, so not only do we get the benefit of the maintenance, you don't have to maintain the integration. You also have the benefit of the best practices that are baked into it about how you actually solve the problem. Has an unbelievable amount of flexibility, but at the same time, there is a way to do this that will be maintainable over time, because some fundamentals don't change. Right. And there's also like, it's actually easier to completely automate something from a code perspective. I could build a tool that automates something a lot easier. A lot of these tools, a lot of ETL tools make the assumption that there's no human interaction. And that's not a correct assumption when it comes to this problem. There's a lot of semi-automated that happens in these types of situations where there's decisions being made along the way that have to be done in context of the design, in context of the ERP and things like that. So there's like, depending on the situation, there's a lot more handoffs. So you have this kind of semi-automated, and you have a user interface, like it just kind of a lot of things happening. So, but from a principal standpoint, yes, it's an ETL tool, but it's an ETL tool very much designed around this problem, and that's some of the value is that like we figured out the little gotchas that people don't think about, because there's this idea, not to get too much in the weeds, but like people get tunnel vision around solutions, right? And when you build it, there's something interesting about building a custom integration. So the customers will like, oh, I can build that because it's really easy to write a program to do exactly what you want in that moment. Okay. And the problem comes into is like 90% of the time spent on any software is maintaining it, not the 10% it took to build it. And what happens is that they go, well, right now we only do things like this. We don't put all the parts go on one bill. We never put them on multiple bills. Like every part's new, or like there's this like hidden baked in rule about their process that gets kind of baked into the software they build. And then they forget what that rule was. They continue down the road, and then they change. They say, you know what would be better? The business changed. Let's do something different. And then all the things they built, which are so heavily dependent upon that process assumption that they don't forgot about, all that stuff breaks. And they don't know how to deal with it anymore. And as a software vendor, we have to deal with so many different ways of people doing things and have the flexibility to adjust to that. That's the other benefit as well, is that you can adjust your process and still use the same tools. You may have to change some configuration, but you can get there. It's not a complete rewrite.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, what I see there is that, to your point, is like, I don't know if I'd call it easy to build your own, but easier, right? Like easier than building a product.
Sure.
But nonetheless, like you had to. I've seen a lot of customers and people build in, to your point, will build in like whatever intelligence to their process, right? That would not be transferable to anyone else ever. So it's not a product, of course. It's just a unique thing done for them, and maybe good enough for them. But to your point, it locks them in, right? It locks them into that process, locks them into that way of working, makes it very hard to adjust to market conditions, adjust to new ways of working, and usually falls apart. It's brittle, right? It falls apart it breaks because, well, stuff changes. Everything changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, even the softwares are integrating to changes. So like, we see this a lot where customers are doing they're taking advantage of like a bug in the software, or they're doing usually the CAD or something like that, or they're doing a weird thing that's atypical, but it really helps solve their the way they do things or something like that. And then like they try to upgrade to the new version of CAD and it just doesn't let them do that anymore. Right. Or like that thing isn't exposed anymore or something, because they're just kind of using it in a way that's non-traditional. And then it just kind of like a house of cards, it all folds because you're dependent upon this thing that was atypical. And what we're hoping to bring to that is like, hey, this is the best practice that we've seen. And because I mean, years ago when I used to do ERP updates, I used to work on ERP like modifications, and their customization of ERP or personalization, whatever term you want to use, of the ERP to make it work for your process is an interesting kind of subfield of development where you actually have to not only make a change that works, which is like obviously fundamental table stakes. The thing has to work, but you also have to figure out the fact that like your mod or your thing that you're changing in the ERP has to be able to be resilient enough to work with the new version of the ERP. What a lot of times when people had in the old days, they would buy the source code of the ERP they bought and then change the source code, and then they were locked in. They never could upgrade.
Right.
And then over time, people got. They figured that out. They're like, well, we aren't going to make any changes to the ERP because we can't upgrade, but then they can't make it their own. They can't make it work for them.
Right.
So what you see today is they have frameworks from which to modify the ERP, but in a way that you actually can modify it and still upgrade. But it takes developers who are keen on that, and they're optimizing for that. You could build the thing 10 different ways, but one of the constraints that you're using during the build is, will this work and will it upgrade? And you might, coding or with any engineering problem, it's a game of compromises. What are you optimizing for? Well, first it has to work. So Of course, that has to be, but I could make it faster. I could make it easier to understand. Like all these different things I could do during the optimization problem of creating the code. But to me, when I used to do those, the two things I optimized for, the number one thing I optimized for was upgradability, which is something that you don't really worry about as much when you're building a siloed system, a system where you own everything. But when you're integrating or you're working with something else, something we have to do as well in CADTALK is, how do I make this in a way that it just absorbs the change? So if that customer decides to upgrade like their ERP, our thing just keeps working. And that's a different way of framing the problem, because a lot of people just make it work for today and they forget about tomorrow. And tomorrow is where all the work is. It's not today.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're working at a company, right, you got a problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Not that people would do this, but you might solve the problem. You might not think for in the future, long term in the future, right? You might only think, I've just got to get this passed for the next 2 years, 3 years. I'm not going to be here. I might not be here. So you may not worry about that, right? To your point, you might not worry about what the future holds because the consequences of that aren't there. Whereas like for us, when we're building something and we're helping with customers, we had to do the consequences, because if it doesn't work, guess what? They're not going to use it. They're not going to keep it. So you have to live with the consequences of your actions. And so you have to make sure that it is, to your point, upgradable to the new systems. It handles the upgrades to the ERP, handles the upgrades to the CAD, upgrades to the PDM. Those changes are the partners we work with. They change their system sometimes 4 times a year.
Mm. Well, the worst kind of, like, we always talked about this, there's like a hierarchy of triage, I guess would say, or it's a triage kind of methodology around like upgradability and things like that. And like the best kind of upgradability is like, it just works. So if I upgrade my ERP and I had this mod or I had this integration and the integration just keeps working, I mean, that's like killer. And the way, and a lot of that goes around like from a design perspective, not to get in the weeds, but where you're actually asking the ERP about what it has and then adjusting to that. So CADTALK does a lot of things where we dynamically adjust to whatever the ERP says how it works. I'm version 2, and now I have these fields. CADTALK will adjust to that. It'll figure that out. And that's a way to like, you're future-proofing yourself with the integration. It's a technique around that. So you're building it with that in mind. I'm like, instead of hard coding what it is for this version, I'm going to ask the thing what it has and then deal with it. That's kind of a way when you do the same thing when you build mods for the ERP, you kind of build that way. But if you can't do that, the second thing you want to do is if you want to break, when they upgrade, you want it to break loudly. I'm broke. I no longer work. Don't, do not pass go, do that, collect $200. It's not working. Because if that happens, you could test it during your upgrade path and go, ooh, this doesn't work. We need to fix it. And then it tells you preferably where it's broken, and then you can fix it. The worst scenario is that you upgrade and it silently breaks. And then it does weird things like, misses some data here, or it doesn't do something quite right. You don't detect it. And you find out a year or 6 months down the road that your costs have been wrong, or you're not accounting for all of your, and then you realize like your profit margin was like, all these things are bad. Like these are really bad situations where it's like, these are things that people get sued over. Right. And that it broke in a way that you didn't realize. And now you're in, you didn't do as well as your data has been wrong. And if you listen to the episode that we did on how data is the asset, that's extremely bad. So optimizing on upgradability, kind of in that kind of, topology is a really good way to think about it. Like, I either want it to just work, I want it to break badly, but I don't want to get to number 3 where it breaks silently. That's bad.
Right.
And so that's the other thing we see with a lot of custom integrations people build is it breaks silently. It just, that thing was supposed to be there. It's not there. It's okay. We'll just skip it.
Right.
And it doesn't go in there, and nobody notices it for 6 months. And they're like, oh my gosh, we had to write off $100,000 or $1 million or whatever it was. It's
right.
bad.
Whatever it is. Yeah. It's bad.
Bad.
Yeah. That's bad. So Scott, I mean, how do we make these systems are different, right? Like what's the difference between like how CADTALK works or how integrations would work with CAD versus like a PDM versus a PLM? Because I assume that they're not all the same. They don't work all the same way, or maybe they do in terms of the integration path.
No, I mean, I think that like, depending on where they're at, there's like, you just have more to work with. I mean, like at the end of the day, you've got parts with bills of material. We're not, reinventing, new things. But like typically in the PLM side, you'll have more data. Like you'll have the PLM data. If you're using M-bombs and things like that, you'll have other concepts that you don't traditionally see in CAD. Like you might have some things with operations, or the PLM tends to bring things to closer to an M-bomb than the CAD will, right? So yeah, there's a little bit extra stuff there, but like at the end of the day, it's still parts and bills of material, right? You're still bringing, it's engineering data, right? You're starting from the same spot you designed it. Like you're not designing something new in a PLM. You're designing in CAD, and it goes to a PLM, then the PLM goes to the. So it's just another step in between where you might be augmenting the data. So I think about it that way, but it's as far as integrating goes, just where are you pointing? Where are you getting this data from? Where's the source at? And from a PDM perspective, it's just more. It's just easy. You can do more. It's just easier because you don't have to figure out where the files are in the directories, right? If you with CADTALK, if we're integrated to CAD, then you're going to go, where's the thing at? You have to go find it, and then you have to make sure all the data, all the files are where they're supposed to be, and they're linked the right way so you can get to them. And there's some complexity there. If it's in PDM, you just go get it. It's like a database. Right. You just go query and get the thing. So, there's nuances to each level, but at the end of the day, it's just source data. Like how much more, it all comes from the engineering design. It's just different iterations of it.
Right. What I was thinking about it is like you have these different systems, and the data, as I think you mentioned, gets enhanced or enriched further. So I start in CAD. That's kind of the foundation. I got my parts, my structure, right? And then I have some data about those structure, usually part numbers and quantities and descriptions, usually kind of the basics there. And then if you use in PDM, right, you put it in PDM, there's usually a workflow system where you could get revisioning, you can add additional information. Maybe you get like a materials list or other data in PDM that you can track, like who last modified this, right? Who's checked it out, that sort of thing. And PDM can really provide, again, a further enrichment. And then of course you can check that data into a PLM, and then you can further enrich it with, could be like quality data, could be further suppliers, could be operations. Some PLMs have like a manufacturing or operations side of the, like a hookup to the PLM. Could have suppliers as well, like how, the list of suppliers who provide these. So you can enrich that data further, right? Maybe some documents, some document management around like both drawings, but also maybe like specification sheets or material sheets, or, as you said, more augmented data. You just keep kind of piling it on. And then like you said, then from there, depending on how much data you have, more or less, then that data set or some portion of that data set can go to the ERP. But along the way, you have to have an integration. It just so happens that like with CAD and PDM, because they're bundled, that usually integration is there. It's already there, right? There's nothing that we would do. And then from CAD and PDM into PLM, there's an integration that needs to happen there. Now that integration could be provided by the vendor. If you bought the same vendor, if you bought another vendor, like a vendor that's not your same CAD system, then you need an integration, another step. And then in that PLM system, you're going to enrich the data some more, suppliers and documents and more workflow and maybe information. And then from there, you're like, okay, now I got this more regularized or cleaner data, right? Because someone's manually gone in there and you've done all this stuff. And then you say, okay, now I have this data. And from that data, I take another set of it, maybe all of it or a subset of that, and then over to ERP. And then there's ERP has its data, right? So even if you have operations in and routings and suppliers and all of that, well, you got the same stuff in ERP. They're going to buy it out of ERP, right? They're going to cut a PO. They're going to track the cost of that. The invoice is all going to be out of ERP. So you have to decide like where that data is going to go, right? And who's going to, like, where are you going to manage that data?
Right. Yeah. So I think that so exactly right. I mean, so that, like, I think people think of it more of like the systems as opposed, and then like, instead of the roads between, like, think of it like they think about the buildings instead of the roads between the buildings. Right. And then like, how do I get from this building to that building? Well, I cross the street, right? Or I go through a tunnel or something, right? Like, and they just kind of abstract away the tunnel and the street, and they just say, well, are you are you now doing this? Do I not go to stay this building? Are you replacing the building? I'm like, no, we are the street.
Right.
We are the tunnel. Right. And,
Right.
they go, oh, because this is an interesting point. Like in Japan, I heard this, like in Japan, they don't name streets, they name blocks. So they're like, why would you name on empty space?
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of the same concept, right? You say like, you're going to go to one, there's this block, and then you just go from block that. So they don't name this. That's what I've heard. They don't name the streets because it is like, to them, it's like naming the empty space. It doesn't make any sense. There's nothing there. It's a street. So it's like people are thinking of the systems the same way. It's like, well, the thing that connects the systems together is just nothing. It's just, all I care about PDM, CAD, ERP. But there's the streets that connect them. There's the communication layer that connects them, that thread. And we are that. We are not actually trying to be any of this. We're the streets, not the blocks.
Right. Right. I always think of us a little bit like plumbing, right? Like the pipe, and the sense of, but to your same point, like those systems like PDM and CAD, that's like one building, if you were. And then PLM is like its own building. And then ERP is its own building. And you still got to get the stuff from each building, right? Like into the next building, and that someone's got to carry that stuff. And sometimes you got to change it, right? Rearrange it into the new building. That's an interesting analogy, right? I got like, I'm living here, I'm in this building, I'm going to this new building. I got to rearrange my furniture, got to put stuff in different places. Oh, I got to get some more furniture, got to, add more stuff in here, put more pictures on the wall and all of that. And then I'm like, okay, I'm moving out of this one. Got to take all this stuff down and carry it over here and then put it up. Well, this has more space. It has more areas. I got to fill this in, right? And somebody's got to do that. And that's why we exist. It doesn't just happen naturally. I think a lot of people go, I think it's natural to think, well, that just happens, right? It just happens. You're like, well, yes, it happens with a software, with a product. Something does that part, right? Just like in plumbing, right? Like when people buy their first house, they realize if you've ever had a problem with your plumbing lines to your house, right? Like people think about, okay, I understand I got plumbing in my house, and that plumbing is, I got to take care of that. But they don't realize until you have a problem that you actually are in charge of the plumbing in your yard, right? And all the way from the street to your yard. And like somebody is responsible for that. And how are you going to get that water? If you're building that house, and maybe they don't ask you this, but like part of the construction is like, how do I get the water and the sewage and that stuff into this house? Like somebody's responsible for that.
Yeah. I think sometimes people will buy will buy land, right? And then they'll like buy land and they're like, oh, I'm going to build a house here. And then people will go, okay, well, the water line's 3 miles away.
Right.
There's the city water is like 3 miles. And you're like, oh, okay, well, will you guys bring the line to me? No.
Right. No.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, by the way, there's no sewage either. Oh. So, and then it's like, so you're digging a well, you're pumping your own water. You're building a cistern, right, or something like that. Or you're doing, what's the term they use for the sewage? It's like a thing they put in the yard. It kind of seeps it out. Septic tank. You're putting a septic tank in, right? So you're, like all of that changes because like you don't realize that, the connection to the system. You have to figure out a way to tie into the network, tie into the systems that you're looking for. So it's the same type of thing. It's like, and I think people kind of a traditional solution that a lot of vendors will do is that the complexity of dealing with all of the other systems they don't have any control over that. So they're like, I don't have any control over everything that I don't know what ERP you have or all these systems you want to integrate. So if you say, I want to integrate to my ERP, they're just going to say, oh, I can sell you this other thing that makes it easier for you to integrate. But they don't really package it that way. It's like, you can integrate if you have PLM.
Right.
Because what they're trying to do is they're just going to make the data look closer to what the ERP looks like. But you still have to get it into the ERP. Right? You still have, it still has to get into the ERP, which they aren't solving in most cases. They're just, same thing. We were talking about nesting integration too. Like the nesting integration, like they had the same problem. They say, well, I have our ERP module, our ERP integration module. And you're like, oh, I solved it. I'm like, no. It just gets the data in a format to make it easier for somebody to write a custom integration. That's all it is. It's like, it just makes it easier. It doesn't solve it because people aren't in the business of trying to like figure out how to integrate to 50 things.
Right.
Like it's just too many. Like, and it's complicated. Like I mean, yeah, Zapier does that, right? Like they do that for these simple systems and stuff like that. And there's some products will try to integrate to the most utilized things. But when you have one of the things with ERPs and these systems that they're very like learning the system enough to integrate to it. Like, how does it even work? It's not like I'm just going to take and create, it's not like a CRM where I'm just creating a customer record. A customer record concept is everywhere. It's like, no, all these things have idiosyncrasies and things they have to deal with and all that. It's just like they're complex. So no vendor they're not in the business of that. They just, all they usually do is they say they have an integration is they have a way for you to integrate. And all they're doing is making it a little easier. They're dumping a file, they're putting a table, they're doing something that lets you, then it's just like this hand wavy. Then you just integrate it to your system,
That's a lot different, right? So what we do and what we've seen is like we connect to them already, right? We have the APIs built. Everything's already pre-built.
Yep.
Data's already flowing. So there isn't this framework to use. It's actually a thing, right? It's actually a thing that moves data from day one.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the equivalent of saying, it's like the customer's like, I need a hole. And you're like, cool, here's a shovel. And then we go, hole's done.
Right.
That's the difference. The drill thing, right? I need holes. I don't think somebody hands you a drill, right? Like the vendor is giving you a drill. They aren't giving you the holes, right? So it's like there's that weird, like our job, we're trying to complete the job, which is to create the hole, and so that having it in the, having an off the shelf integration to that system that does what you're trying to do, that's what we try to provide. And that's the part people lose a lot of times. They try to bundle it all up into one thing. And it's nothing against anybody in those systems who sell those. They want to sell systems. And if you're asking them to solve their problem, they're going to make a hammer. They're going to make everything a hammer. Like, oh, you need a PLM. You need this. You need a thing that makes it easier for you to do the thing you want to do. They aren't getting you to the thing you want to do. They're just getting you closer. And the getting you closer is to allow them to sell something. Well, heck yeah, let's do that. So you got to look at the incentives, right? So
right,
yeah.
Well, Scott, this was a good conversation about a little bit of backtrack on review of like what CAD systems, what PDMs do, what PLMs do, and what they do, and then like and how the data gets to one place to another, and where we operate within there. So I think at the end of the day, we're not here to replace those systems. We're here to tie them together so that each customer can use their best in breed. Right? They can use the engineering system they want, or the PLM they want, or the ERP that they want, and they can tie them all together with something like CADTALK in order to make it easy for them, right? So they can use the systems that work best for what the used to be work best. So what it used to be is like these big monolith systems, right? That I do like an everything app, right? We go, I'm an ERP, I do it all, or I'm a this, I do it all, like the everything app. But I think now the trend is toward leveraging each vendor to be the best of breed, and then using something like CADTALK to integrate the two. So that you can get the best out of the best out of both worlds, right? So that you're not compromising, because just like anything else, you can't get everything you want out of one particular system, because there are different jobs to be done and they focus on different things.
It's just hard to do. It's hard to do multiple things as a company really well. You tend to do, if you try to do a lot of things, you can do a lot of things, but you can do them all kind of or you can do a few things really, really well. And, so really the idea would be, can I have all the best of breed applications? And like you said, tie them together to where I have all of the benefits and none of the downside.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I won't be able to say to CTOs and CIOs and IT directors anytime soon that you can get rid of all those engineering systems, right? Mm-hmm. You won't be able to get rid of CAD and PDM or PLM or ERP. You won't be able to get rid of all of those. But I think the key here is to make them all work for you and get the value out of each one for what it really works well on. And then, integrate them, and then integrate them, but also leverage them in the best way possible. So look to the systems that you have and get the functionality out of them the functionality that they are successful in, right? What they do the best, get that functionality out of there, and then allow something that integrates the two to make it work for you. Unfortunately, it won't change the IT budget, but really each of those has its unique needs for the of our manufacturing and engineering company.
Absolutely.
Well, Scott, that's been a good conversation. Again, another good, somewhat of a review, but a more enhancement around, where does CADTalk fit in there? I think that analogy of the roads or the pipes is good, right? We're connecting things together. These systems are, like you said, buildings, but they need to be connected together, and that's what we do.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Scott, it's been another great podcast. Good talking to you. We'll have another one next week. Another new topic. I don't know if we have a guest coming up, but either way, I look forward to talking to you next time.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.